Hello and welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. I'm your host, Mark Philpott. And if you are a regular listener, welcome back. It's great to have you supporting us. And if this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. Head on over to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com and you can catch up on all of our amazing previous episodes. Now, in today's episode, I'm super excited because we're going to be combining two of my favorite things, travel and food. So if you love one of those two things, you have landed in the right place. Today, my guest has traveled the world and honed his skills in becoming an excellent chef. So why don't we head on over now and introduce you to my guest today. His name is Dion Taylor. Dion, welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
How excited are you?
Oh, look, it's unbelievable. I'm looking outside my window now going, it's not exactly a blue sky day, but I'm still getting to chat to some pretty cool people.
Fantastic. Good. Well, the first thing I'm going to ask is, have you ever been on a podcast show before?
No, this is new, something very new. So I'm excited to see how it all unfolds and I'll take some learnings away.
Do you listen to podcasts?
I do. I'm also an avid Audible person, so I love this style of communication.
Brilliant. So what kind of podcasts are you into?
I like listening to, well, similar to this, I like the learning nature of podcasts and being able to, I guess, discover a little bit deeper than what you would normally on a surface level conversation. I've just finished listening to a Richard Branson Losing My Virginity Audible book as well, and I thought I had no idea that man has such a broad upbringing and way of life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an incredible way to find out about people, isn't it, when you actually take the time to sit and listen. And I think that whole audio sphere gives us another dimension where we can get deeper into understanding about things.
Could be a little daunting for me right now, but I'm not sure. I'll just go with it and see what I decide is going to naturally come out.
Look, I'm going to be gentle, seeing it's your first time, and I won't give you anything too radical to deal with.
Magic.
Now, listen, I always give my guests the opportunity to dedicate their episode to someone special in their life. So who would you like to dedicate this particular show to today?
Oh, wow. I will dedicate it to my late uncle because he was one of the co-inspirers for me to begin my cooking world.
Fantastic. Okay, and what was his name?
Mark, my Uncle Mark.
Well, he must have been a great guy.
Yeah, he was, yeah. He's certainly shaped me in a lot of different ways, even though we didn't spend a lot of time face to face. He was always there, and he was someone that, led me the way when it came to my culinary adventures.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, whereabouts in the world are you actually sitting down talking to us from today?
I'm in beautiful Bundaberg in the Queensland coast.
Bundaberg. Okay, well, we've got listeners in 85 countries around the world. So do you want to give a little bit of a geographical lesson to them on where exactly Bundaberg is?
Fantastic. So if you flew into Brisbane Airport in Queensland, and then let's take a car, we would be about 4.5 hours north of Brisbane, or about an hour and a half south of Gladstone.
Okay, so it's pretty easy to get to as far as flying into an international airport and moving on from there.
Yeah, correct. Fly into Brisbane and then catch another flight from Brisbane to Bundaberg, and you'd be sitting in our humble little airport there, getting ready for some food adventures and amazing things in this region.
Fantastic. How long have you lived in Bundaberg for?
I've been fortunate to be here for about 15 years.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you've got to know the place pretty well. Has it grown in that time? Is it a place that's constantly changing and evolving?
You know, it's funny. I thought of that just the other day, and I went, how big has Bundaberg actually gone? I think it's probably not doubled, but it's certainly, I would suggest, increased by about a 30% population growth in that time.
Amazing. We're going to get into your backstory and find out about all your travels in relation to food. But as you just mentioned earlier, there were certain members in your family that inspired you and I guess were role models when it came to food. Can you tell us a bit about that to get going?
Yeah, I've had some really interesting family members. So my great-grandfather, Mike, was actually one of the first guys on an Antarctica exploring ship. And I recently discovered that his first year down there, I think, was in 1939, and he was the cook on board.
Oh, wow.
And I'm thinking to myself, he probably wouldn't have had a lot of fresh produce.
Yeah, I wonder what they were eating, actually.
It's fascinating and look, I never really got the chance to drill down into that whole experience, but it would take them, I think from memory, they were gone for 12-month periods of time, and they'd be smashing through ice and everything else. It would take them, I think from memory, it was about 3 months to get down there, and I'm just going, imagine being in that galley kitchen, feeding 20 or 30, I would assume, blokes on board, so they're all
Yeah.
going to want a big meal,
Yeah. Yeah.
looking around going, okay, let's see what's in that cupboard over there, or how do you order all that food for those people and just assume that the weather is going to be great, or do you have a backload of food? I just find the whole thing in the different styles of cookery that my family have become involved with, they're miles apart from working on a boat to working in a high-end hotel.
Yeah, fantastic. Now this is a passion that started very early in your life when it came to your connection to food. When are your first memories around, wanting to go down the line of, having not only a career but a passion about food?
Everyone in my family that knew jokes about it being up from when I was 9. And so I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I ask them what they want to do, and we kind of instill in them to be healthy and happy.
Yeah.
And here's me at the age of 9 going, no, I've got to pick up some knives, and I want to be a chef, and I want to follow my great uncle and my grandfather, and let's just get started.
Yeah, wonderful. And how was that in terms of conflict with other kids at that age? I guess most kids were out kicking footies around and doing all that sort of stuff, and you wanted to be in the kitchen with knives and forks and stuff. So, how was that in the early days? Was there some kind of rebellion against that, as far as your siblings and also your friends and stuff? Were they wondering why you weren't getting out there and kicking a ball around versus being in a kitchen?
I love it. I did used to play soccer as a kid when I was growing up, so that was sort of my main go-to sport. Aside from that, though, it was interesting, and I have never thought about it with my siblings before, but there's nearly 9 years between me and my next sibling.
Right.
So I probably had a lot of time to really get in amongst it all and become, maybe that was my go-to thing with my parents, is that I could get in there and cook them food.
Yeah, brilliant. Where were you actually raised in Australia? Because you're not from Bundaberg originally, are you?
I was actually born in Alice Springs.
Oh, right in the middle of the country.
Yeah, so it's quite fascinating. I spent time in Alice Springs and Darwin, Cairns, Gladstone, back to the Northern Territory. So it's been a very broad travel awareness, I guess, of where I was brought up. There was no ever one longevity of place.
Mm.
And so, yeah, for me, it was just about going, okay, great, we're going over here. And maybe that was part of my the willingness to use local produce, is the fact that I never really got ever experience to being anywhere long enough to go, oh, this is all we get.
Yeah, right. What was it like growing up in those regional parts of Queensland, Australia?
I guess for me, it's always been about the people. So the beauty of regional Queensland or regional Australia, it's just about getting into the underlying part of any region. So for me, it was about, because I knew I was never really going to be in any one of those places for much longer than about 3 or 4 years, but you had to build strong friendships quickly.
Mm.
And it wasn't about sitting on the edge trying to work out what was happening. You had to sort of get in amongst it. So I took great comfort in going, right, okay, soccer is my thing. You got to join soccer. Or then it was about going, what else is out here? And often I found it was about getting out of the region and exploring and seeing the natural beauty and just getting in amongst it all and having some fun.
Now, a lot of regional Australia is having a pretty hard time at the moment with droughts and significant weather events. Can you remember back in the day when you were young, was it just as bad out there in the outback parts of Australia?
Yeah, I remember times in Alice Springs there, and that's obviously the desert weather, and so it has high heat periods and quite low cold periods, to be fair. And there were periods there, I remember, when you'd wake up in the morning and there was hail on the ground at sort of winter time, or there was been sleet on them, and you think, when did that happen? And then on the flip side, I remember walking to work there in periods of time during my apprenticeship, and it was like 45, 48 degrees, and that's intense heat.
Mm-hmm. Can you remember your first trip to a big city?
I think for me, probably my first big city was probably going to places like Darwin. heavens forbid, which is hardly a big city in the scheme of things. But I do remember a trip I went down to Melbourne and just going, holy, this place is crazy.
How old were you then?
I think realistically, I probably would have been about 16, 17. And so that's quite old to be having those sorts of bigger experiences. And you sort of go, and now it's funny, I go into Brisbane semi-regularly and you're sitting in there and I look at the kids getting pushed around in their prams or walking the streets with their parents and you think, they've got a whole other world of reality.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it didn't take long from your first initial forays at the age of 9 into cooking to start thinking at actually working abroad and being involved in the food business overseas. Tell us about how that came about.
It was a really interesting period of time. Going through my apprenticeship, worked long hours, big days, and everything else, and you just kind of go, there's got to be something more in this. And I was sitting back one day reading the local newspaper, and I'm not quite sure how it all eventuated, but there was a little tiny ad in the paper about working abroad. I thought, okay, I'll take the bait, so to speak. Followed it through a little bit further, and it was actually a recruitment agency looking for people to work in hospitality in the UK.
Right.
Heavens forbid, I thought, yeah, I'll keep pushing with this because this is just too good to be true. I've got an escape here. I can finally get abroad and finally get out of Alice Springs. But it's a beautiful place, but it was time for me to move on. So anyway, I sent through my resume and literally from memory, it'd be within about 7 days. And I'm going, okay, great. Just need to do a phone interview and we'll get you moving. I'm like, what do you mean moving? And like, right, good, we're ready. Are you ready?
Yeah, wow. How was that? Was that a bit of a nerve-wracking experience to kind of get that such short notice?
It was in some regards because a lot of my friends that had travelled previously, what they said the process is you book your flights, you get off at Heathrow, and there was a magazine over there. I'm just trying to think what it was called. But you'd sort of grab the magazine, and in the magazine was going to be full of jobs, and because you're Australian, they'd just employ you. I'm like, that sounds daunting as all buggery. Whereas my process seemed a whole lot easier because I actually went over to the UK. I knew exactly the hotel I was going to be working at. I knew my start day. I knew I had 2 days to get there. And reality kicked in that, okay, I guess I'm off.
So Alice Springs to London, that's quite a jump.
Well, strangely enough, though, Mark, I did end up doing a posting just outside of Stratford. So I went from one small village to another small village. I kept it real to start with.
Was that your first overseas trip?
Yes, it was actually. So nothing like 25 hours on the plane just to ease you into it.
Yeah, how was that? How was your first experience on a long haul flight?
It was, for me, I just thought, look at this, there's all these free movies to watch. So it was eating and drinking and watching movies and just taking in the whole experience because it was, for me, it was totally new. It was something I'd never done before. And here's me feeling like a little bit of a pioneer adventurer. But then as you look around and realize that you're only one of 400 people on the plane, you lose your entitlement to be called an adventurer.
Airline food is often something we like to forget about, but do you remember your first airline meal?
It was probably in line with those comments. I normally find, and they're generally fairly heavy on carbs, and you just go, it's probably the last thing we need to be doing is loading up on bread and starches before we embark on a 25-hour flight. But yeah, it's what it was, and look, for me, it's part of the journey. If you don't have those experiences, I think we miss out on element of that travel.
How was the emotional state when you were sitting on that flight? Were you kind of thinking to yourself, right, I'm off to live my big dream now, this is the first step in the journey, or were you not kind of that conscious of it at the time?
The bit that always sits with me, and I often recall it actually, because it wasn't the flight, it was the fact that because I had an ancestry visa. So I had 4 years to contemplate my life over there, and here's me being, what was I left at 21. So I'd pretty much jumped on this huge big plane and went, okay, I'm out. And it's interesting now, I kind of go, I was either brave or stupid. because I'd left an amazing job. However, that whole process is what has shaped me from where I am today. Working with international people it's not something you can take for granted. You have to get your head around it. It was a big job settling in.
How was the family support? Were they all anxious and keen for you to go, or was there some reputation in terms of, not wanting you to leave home and all that sort of stuff?
I think it was quite funny, actually, because from memory, my 21st birthday present was, here's your backpack. I think, and it wasn't done this way, but it was kind of like, okay, there's the support you need, off you go. Push you out of the nest. But I was very fortunate, though, because my family came to visit 12 months after I'd been over there.
Yeah.
So I had an amazing opportunity to show them around my backyard after I'd been living over there for 12 months. And it was great. And I think that the fact that I could then here's this boutique brewery, and this is where we get our cheese from, and come and have a look at the village markets. And it was a real eye-opener for me to be able to be the tour leader, so to speak, and sort of take them around. And the beauty of when you obviously arrive in England, everything's so close.
Yeah, compared to getting across the number of big states in Australia.
Yeah, like we went and drove from Midlands up to Scotland, and they're like, oh, we'd never think we'd see Scotland. And we went to Wales, and here's us driving around in a car 7 hours this way and 7 hours that way. And thinking back to living in Alice Springs, going 7 hours either way, you're still in nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when you first went over to the UK, what time of the year did you arrive?
Oh, wow. I'm fairly sure it was around September. Because I remember my first year we had a white Christmas, which was hilarious because we ended up with this. Here's me jumping on a plane, being exposed from like 45-degree heat, getting to Darwin and then flying from Darwin, doing all the little hop legs as you're doing back then.
Yeah.
Landing in Heathrow going, oh, why does it feel like it's about 5 degrees out here? I think my first big capital expense was buying a full-length jacket to keep myself warm.
Yeah.
And then here's me experiencing my first Christmas some months after being in the UK and just going, let's make a snowman. And there was enough snow to be dangerous, Mark. It was really quite funny because there's probably about 2 inches of snow. So it wasn't a very white snowman. It was very brown and exposed to the grass elements. And we call it our bush snowman because it was very bush looking like.
How did that kind of, first few months over there, how did that kind of start to shape you as a person, coming out of Australia for your first time living overseas in a place like that? What were some of the changes you went through as a human being?
Wow. Some of the fastest changes I think that took place was realizing that even though I'd worked in some really big kitchen brigades in Australia, the ones in the UK they're almost like the movies. Like I watched the movie Burnt just recently, and I look at that and go, yes, that's how it was. So it's working in those hotels where you might have one of my exec chefs there. I remember him distinctly. He could speak Spanish, he could speak French. He was obviously able to speak English and talk to us Australians. But when you are in a team of that size, you have to learn to fall into line.
Yeah.
It was very much along the lines of, it's okay for you to be a human being after hours, but while you're here, you are mine, and you will do this. And it was good. It shaped me to be structured, but it also gave me a massive insight into creativity. Working alongside some of these chefs that some of them were younger than us, but some of them had been in the industry for 20, 30 years. And you're looking at the knife skills and the full appreciation of what these people can do, and see behind the scenes, we get to see that.
I guess to a certain extent, it has to be a military style kind of operation, doesn't it, to be successful? Oh,
very. And as we were jesting, if you think putting out one course is hard enough when you've got 20 people, think about putting out like degustation courses, 8, 10 courses, and there's 100 people in the restaurant. And my favorite memory, and this is the bit that sticks to me, and I have no idea how I did it, but the head chef would be at the pass, so that's where the food leaves to go out to the restaurant.
Yep.
the orders would come in, and he would just be saying, "New order, boom, 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 boom," and here's all the courses. We didn't get a docket. It was, you remember it.
Wow. Wow. Intense
It was.
stuff
And
indeed,
I think to myself, now I went, wow, now if someone asks me to remember something, I'm writing it down. I've got choice now.
So what was the goal when you first went over there? What was, did you always want to be an executive chef when you started off? Was that the goal?
No, it wasn't actually. It was, I just wanted to be around food. I had a genuine passion to explore and discover what the world has. I very quickly realised that living in the Northern Territory, but even when I was doing time in Queensland, a lot of our produce is brought in from other regions. Well, going to the UK, we had access to some of the best food and best commodities in the world because they don't have a very big growing base. So the majority of their food was imported, and you kind of took it for granted. But I remember a chef saying, "I want the best pineapple you can find me in the world." And I'm going, this guy must be mad. But genuinely, he wanted this pineapple. He wanted it on this dish, and right or wrong, he knew that he could get it if he was prepared to pay for it.
Yeah.
And I then fast became aware that if you have a captive market of people that appreciate quality, they'll pay to enjoy it.
I guess being in the UK would have opened your eyes to a lot of different cuisines and opportunities to see food in all sorts of different lights.
Oh, mind-altering, and it wasn't so much the fact that Australia didn't have it. It was the fact that at that time, the UK had access to so much more. They had an international market. They had access to all the EU countries around them. If you wanted the best olive oil in the world, you were getting it from Italy. If we wanted the best cheeses or the best meats, that's what you would order. And it was really interesting. My favourite memory in the UK from a foods commodity, we had this one guy that worked in it was a mobile fromagerie, so a cheese van on wheels. And he would pull up to our restaurant twice a week and go, "Okay, good, I've been to Scotland, I've done my Wales bit." Here's me thinking, now realising that it's not that far away, but all he does is he drives around the UK with all this cheese, selling it to the restaurants and hoteliers, and I never knew how he restocked it. But to me, it sounded like he would just go to any port where he knew that he could get it from, and then off he'd go again.
Right.
It was funny that I can still smell it. You open the back door, and it was a refrigerated van.
Yeah.
But you'd walk in there and you go, oh, it was like the worst toe jam you could ever smell. Like if you think going into a guy's rugby club after just playing 2 or 3 games and all their dirty socks are in it was like that.
Like that, yeah. Oh, shocking.
Yeah, full on.
Now, having lived in Europe a long time myself, there was always a myth running around that I thought was that the UK food is always stodgy and dingy, but the fact is that you can get some of the best cuisine in the world in the UK because of all the immigrant factor coming into the country, yeah?
And it becomes obvious when you do start walking around. Yeah, look, the UK, don't get me wrong, I'm like everyone else. I love my time over there having fish and chips because it was some of the best cod I've ever eaten. But then you go down the other path and you think bread and butter puddings and all these things and all the real heavy, stodgy, yeah, they were there. But they were also what formed part of my experience over there. The amazing thing now is I have so many fantastic memories of the UK around the number of Indian restaurants in the UK.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
There's no curry like it in the world. It seems to be part of their ethnic traits.
Yeah.
It's just getting access to some of these curries and making sure you have your curry and your naan bread and a big pint of beer, and that's what we would do at 10 o'clock at night after work.
Yeah. Now, living over there would have given you, as you've already mentioned, an opportunity to travel around and see the UK. What were some of your favourite places that you went to?
I did enjoy Scotland in the UK. It was their breakfast concepts that for me, like when you start eating haggis and black pudding and all these things, and now having a full appreciation that's every single village that you drive through seems to have their own dish, their own flavour, their own representation of who they are in that part of the world. And I think for me, it's now come back to the point where I can see now how Australia is doing similar experiences. And it's even just thinking about this conversation now, I can see the fact that there's so many different ways that countries put themselves on a map. England was known for heavy, stodgy food, but we also had access to some of the best commodities in the world. But you just had to be prepared to pay more than £10 for that meal.
Did you find the English countryside to be something quite dramatic and amazing after living in the red dirt of Australia's outback?
Beautiful. My favourite memory there are all the fields of the daffodils that would grow in the wild.
Yeah.
And you're driving down the village lanes, and you've got, I guess, similar to Bundaberg in some regards, where we have the rock walls, like that were obviously, as they were preparing the land for cropping, they just mound the rocks up on the side of the road, and they become sort of like your racing edges, because you can't go left or right when those rock walls are there.
Yeah.
But then walking through the fields where they had the little I can't recall what they call them, but the little timber steps that you'd walk into the next green, and you were allowed to walk through the farmer's land as long as you didn't destroy the place. They encouraged people to wander through the open greens. Beautiful.
And there wasn't 3,000 kilometres of distance to walk either. That was the other thing.
No, there was no concern for life. You could have been at the top of the village green, and you look down the hill and you go, oh, that's okay, I'm just over the hill and we're home again.
Yeah, plus there's always plenty of water on supply as well.
That's right.
Now, you would have come across a lot of Antipodeans working in the hospitality industry in the UK?
I think there were more in the UK than there were in Australia. I would love to know how immigration works out the balance of, oh, hang on, we've got to get some Australians back, quick. Yeah. Population's dropping because they're all over in the UK working.
Did that make it easier from a social point of view in terms of building friendships and getting to know people?
It did, because there were periods of time there, like our days in those kitchens, we were doing 16, 18-hour days, and it's physically and mentally demanding. But sometimes just, like, we would get care packages sent over to us, Mark, and you'd get little, the Australians we'd often live on site in the hotels.
Yeah.
And so these care packages of Vegemite and Milo and Tim Tams would magically appear throughout the staff accommodation. And that was the beauty, is if there was only one Australian in the house, it just wasn't quite the same.
How did your skill sets evolve in terms of getting all this experience? Was it something that evolved quite quickly, or was it a gradual process in terms of your trajectory of becoming a better chef in the kitchen?
It did take time, to be fair. Australian training, I believe, it's a whole different ballgame. Our experience here was very much on tools, time in kitchen. It's obviously changed a little bit now. But when you go to the UK, they were doing 12-month intensive apprenticeships as well. So for us, the Australians in the kitchen had already spent an amount of time in the kitchen, but we were changing skill sets to meet the demands of that type of cooking. Like I'd never done things like crispy skin confit duck legs and those sorts of things. So it was going, oh, okay, let's learn how to do confit duck, but then learn the technique about putting the crispy skin on, but then to come all the way back, oh, actually, let's pull the duck apart, because whole ducks would just magically appear in the kitchen and go, oh, okay, rightio. So it was learning 101, and my favourite memory was it was working so closely beside that other person. And it was a genuine, if you could see the transfer of knowledge, it would have been a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But it did take time. It's certainly not for the faint-hearted to go even going to an English-speaking country. A lot of the people in those kitchens, we had a lot of French in a lot of those kitchens. And when they were cranky, they weren't speaking English.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine so, because you you don't think about that on the surface level, but when you dig down, like you've just explained, I guess there's a whole multinational crew on board, really, to make some of these kitchens even operate.
Very. And the chefs, the exec chefs of those kitchens, they knew that they could access any talent they wanted from anywhere in the world. So traditionally, a lot of the French chefs were working in the patisserie section because obviously, I mean, who doesn't want homemade pastry?
Yeah.
There were some very beautiful experiences there. And I think really, I remember being over there and probably putting on about 10 or 15 kilos over there because I ate my way through that kitchen. Got to try this and got to taste that.
Did you work around different establishments? Did you move from place to place?
I was very fortunate, actually. I did. I worked at 5 places over the 4 years. I spent probably 3 of those years following one particular chef. And so when he left the first hotel group, then we started traveling together, and I had some friends with me from Australia that came and joined me as well. So we all ended up moving together as a group. So it was almost like a mobile workforce. It was quite fascinating.
Yeah.
There was 4 of us, which would potentially get enough kitchen power up that you could open a kitchen. And so we did that a little bit and kick-started. I remember we went to a place in East Sussex, and it had been closed for a period of time. So we went in there and kick-started it over again. And you then sort of go through the battle of trying to get recognition for food, and in a village where that place had been closed for a period of time. So we did the hard yards, and we went around to these places and went, okay, this could be a good one. But for me, it was about as long as we were growing all the time. That was our main focus.
So what elements of that experience didn't you like the most?
Wow. I could probably genuinely say the hard part about being somewhere for 4 years, and I came back and forth into Australia for holidays, but I remember there was a period of time over there on my 4th year, and I went, I genuinely have to go because I either decide to become English and stay, or I have to go back to Australia and start adulting. It was
interesting decision process, yeah.
It wasn't a hard decision, but it was the emotional part of having to leave everyone behind in the UK. But it was also a beautiful thing to realize that I knew who I was, and I knew that I wanted to maintain my Australian citizenship as well.
Yeah, right. The United States came on your radar as well, and you had a bit of an experience with food in the US. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Again, another one of these little ads in the paper. It's hilarious. I must be looking out for these little moments. There was one there about working abroad, and I went, okay, let's go down this path again. It worked last time. This time it was actually, as it turned out, it was working in summer camps. So bizarrely enough, here's me. Yep, never worked with kids before. I've got siblings and I've got hundreds of cousins, and I guess that makes me qualified. So I had to go and get a first aid certificate, and that was about it. It was another one of those experiences. Off we go. Let's buy the tickets. And the whole journey then started to unfold. And while I wasn't working on tools in the US, the food journeys, again, I still find it amazing that you can go from one end of the world to another, and the food is that broadly apart. It's miles apart.
Yeah.
States.
Whereabouts were you in the US?
I was working in upstate New York.
Okay.
So that was about 45 minutes outside of New York itself. So being it was in the Bear Mountains.
Beautiful.
Magical, like the forest and the trees and everything else, but there was no real restaurant scene up there. It was all very much major food chains that you could see on a highway. Things like the IHOP, the International House of Pancakes, and TGI Fridays, and all the big boys, the big bad boys that are out there in the marketplace. Probably not doing a lot of good stuff for the smaller guys, but my memories of the States food-wise, I have probably 3 different versions. My first one, I absolutely fell in love with this restaurant up there, which had the most amazing seafood. And to me, the fact that we could buy a bucket of prawns or a bucket of lobster tail and a bucket of beer it was like heaven.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, have I died already? I'm way too young for this transition.
Yeah.
But it was fresh and it was so simple. There was no dipping sauces. It was, there's your prawns, there's your scrap bucket, and there's your beer. Enjoy. Take as long as you need. So that was one of my key memories. And then I have another one. I fell in love with bagels.
Oh, yeah.
Holy. The New Jersey bagels particularly.
Yeah.
There's nothing like it. I've never had a bagel like that ever again.
No, they're pretty famous for sure. What about the Big Apple? Did you get to spend some time, tasting your way around Manhattan?
I did a little bit. Admittedly, I was probably a little bit scared of that scene when it comes to the high-end food, because here's me walking around with my backpack when we were transitioning between going into camp and coming out, and you're thinking, they're not really going to want me walking in there with my backpack. So for us, the US food experience and the Manhattan was big pieces of pizza, the donuts, the liter cups of coffee. I went down that real working class food experience, and to be fair, it's still pretty special. There's Italians there that they know how to make pizza. Don't get in their way. It's a pretty special, probably a traditional experience where mum taught the son, or son taught the whoever, and it was beautiful. And I think you can see the traditional hooks that are used in family restaurants.
Yeah.
Whether they want to do it or not is a whole nother ball game, but you could see that family was just loving doing it.
I think that's one of the fantastic things about food around the world, and in particular in places like New York City, where you have this connection between personality, preparation, and the actual food that comes out. There's something, I think New York has something really unique about in that experience, because as you just mentioned, there's nothing like walking into an Italian pizzeria in New York City and the whole senses come alive, don't they? It's just another world.
The aromas, like you get caught just walking down the street. Yeah, oh, hang on, where is that coming from? And you can, I think individually we pick up on the scent of what we feel we need at that moment, and it's broad. It's another international experience. If you want all sorts of different foreign foods, they're there in abundance. It's beautiful.
Did that US experience kind of shape your mind in terms of what path you wanted to go down when it came to preparing food?
Probably it added. I don't know that it shaped. I think it helped me realize that, hang on, here's another broad experience. For me, the US was very much about, we had 50 international staff at the camp that I worked at. At one point there, we had 27 different countries being represented. And it was that appreciation for the international strength of working together. So taking my very basic skill sets from Australia, having them further expanded in the UK, and then blending it with my time in the States, it's like another layer of the onion. I probably can't pinpoint the exact experience that it gave me, but it was another one of those. I did 4 years working through there, and I'm thinking, this is another experience. If I don't leave now, I'm going to be staying here again. Let me go and get a green card. It was another amazing country and another amazing experience, but it was probably the icing on my cake, to be fair.
Would you have liked to taken your great-grandfather on that journey?
Yeah, it was. I would have thought my experience over those sort of 5 years of bouncing back and forth and around the place and doing hopping between, I probably had the benefit that he didn't of speed of travel. I could very easily get to those places quite quickly, but I still felt like I was pushing myself in a pioneer sense.
Yeah, cool. That's a great way of explaining it. So after 4 or 5 years, you came back to Australia?
Yeah. I think I was broken, to be fair. I was physically exhausted because it's pretty intensive when you're working. Those roles that I had between the UK and even the US, they were all living experiences. You're constantly being you're on the whole time.
Yep.
So there was no real downtime. And coming back I actually flew back in to Alice Springs because that's where my family were, and I went, I just need some time to see what I want to do.
Mm.
And interesting enough, I did spend some time out of kitchen. I did some time teaching cookery as well. And it's not true what they say, if you can't do teach, it's by no means that way at all. I found it probably, if anything, the most humbling experience being able to share some of my knowledge and enthusiasm of food to people that are probably going to go ahead and do the same thing.
Is there a lot of burnout in the industry? Did you see this happening with a lot of other people that have gone through similar experiences as yours?
Yeah, and I've probably seen that more so the last 10 years because in a lot of kitchens there's not many chefs over 40. And it is I don't want to say it's a young person's game. The older people that are in it, it's about looking after yourself, managing fatigue, managing the emotional side, and it is physically a challenge because the kitchens are hot. It's 50 degrees often in most kitchens. They're not air-conditioned comfort. We don't spend a lot of time sitting down in amongst those 12-hour days. There's a bit of work involved. But when you have the right group or the right team inside your kitchen, it's the energy that it creates. It's pretty special stuff to feel, but you can't always see it.
Is it something you've got to step away from to ensure that your creativity keeps evolving?
I think probably like most artists, you need to refresh. I think the step away periods of time, it gives you a realization that it's not my everything. Because when you're in that intense creative space, I think you get lost. You're focused so intensely on improvement or creation or perfection that everything else goes to the sides.
Did you think about setting up a rehabilitation centre in Alice Springs for chefs around the world and bring them over here to chill out?
Love it. If I was going to do it, it probably wouldn't be in Alice. I would probably that would be more like penitentiary. But chefs are crazy. They need space.
Bundaberg perhaps would be the place to bring them.
Look, Bundy's pretty special. I do have some very fond memories from being here. And maybe it is. Maybe we could then have a little space where I take the chefs out on a boat and we go and travel around and we go and catch our fish, and we could then go to the growers on the side of the road and harvest their own vegetables.
I think they would love it. So tell us how you ended up in Bundaberg. How did that story evolve?
Yeah, well, after my period of time in the Alice, I went, okay, well, my dad was actually living over here.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, well, I'll come over and see what he's all about, what he was up to, and he was working over here, and I thought, I'll give it a bit of a go and have a wander around. So I stayed, I think I was over here for 3 weeks for holidays. On about week 2, I was offered a job, and week 3, I was had my property in Alice Springs for sale and was working out how I was going to move over.
Right, so it was a pretty quick process. Not quite as quick as going to the UK, though. No,
that's right. It was. I'm getting some character traits coming through this podcast, actually.
You are. Yeah.
It was a beautiful experience because for me, Bundaberg, even 15 years ago, there's a lot of similarities to Alice Springs in the fact that, well, now our region is about 120,000 people if you take in all of the outskirts. It's still not a big city. Like, you can still have personality in a city of this size. You can still discover things quite regularly after being here for 15 years. I still discover new streets that I've never been down. So I like the fact that I can still be in a town of this size or city of this size and just fit in, like it's comfortable.
What were some of your first impressions of moving to Bundaberg? You'd come out of an extensive period in the UK where there's certain climatical things to consider. You were used to Alice Springs. Living on the coast and near the water again, was that something new and nice?
Yeah, but I mean, I personally live in East Bundaberg, so I'm sort of in the middle of the river and the coast. So I believe I've got the best of both worlds. But I guess for me, I was taken by the river because the Todd River in Alice Springs flows about 2 or 3 times a year after a lot of rainfall. This one, the Burnett River in Bundaberg, there's water in it all the time. I don't know what is this stuff. It was very much, that was the very basic part of realizing that the water is there. It felt secure.
Yep.
Seeing water all the time, and the ocean. Like I had my period of time living in the Northern Territory, I could count on one hand how many times I'd been in the ocean. And to be fair, I probably still can count on one hand how many times I go in the ocean here. But I love walking on the beach. I love seeing the ocean. It's a different appreciation. It's being able to be comfortable with just the beauty that we have here. It's stunning.
You've got a young family. Is it a good place to raise a family in Bundaberg?
Yeah, my girls, like, I love the fact that they feel comfortable that they can ride down to their local park, or as a family, if we want to go to the shopping centre, or whether we go out for a restaurant somewhere, or like they do kung fu and sports and swimming and soccer and all these sorts of things, and they're getting their own little personalities. But I believe the opportunities for them will be, I sort of say to them, look, if you can dream it, it's possible.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where you live, anywhere in the world. It's about making the most of what you have in that place, is where we come from.
So will you be buying them backpacks when they're 21 and sending them off?
Do I have to wait till that long?
Spoken like a true dad.
Yeah, that's right. Here's me thinking, I wonder if the 16th birthday present, that's to you.
Yeah, plant the seed anyway, at least.
We recently did a Bali trip, actually, Mark, and they loved it. They were learning the language. They were getting down to the bartering part. They enjoyed the fact that, here you go, here's $10,000.
Yeah.
Rupiah.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting way of showing kids just how big the world is make them realize just exactly how much there is out there.
So let's talk about the Asian flair, and we can talk about places like Singapore, Vietnam, and Malaysia, because they're places that are high on your list. What's the connection to Asian cuisine for you?
There's no curries like it. I love the fact that you can have an amazing Malaysian curry, or even if you start bouncing around, like you go through Chinese elements or Vietnamese element, each one of their styles, they're so fresh and so vibrant. And I love the fact that you could have 20 ingredients in one dish and you can taste 6. But if you took out those other 14, it wouldn't be the same dish.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Have you had an opportunity to test out a lot of the hawker centres in Singapore, for an example?
I love the fact that you can go and you can actually go in there and you can just play. It's hilarious. Like the market scenes of the Asian countries, they're so vibrant. It's the energy of being able to go, oh wow, and you just see everything in its raw state. I remember some places that we went through, and even going through any of those food village or markets and things like that. It's very much, you want a chicken, buy the whole chicken.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, we don't really do that here in Australia. It's oh no, I don't really want the feet. No, well that's what you get. You get the whole chicken, guts and all. Here it comes.
You raise a good point. So, having travelled a lot around the world myself, I kind of think about looking at different ways that food's prepared and presented and shared and experienced. And I always thought, well, why doesn't that happen in Australia? Why don't they do that? So has there been anything in particular that you would love to see come into the Australian eating experience that you've had overseas?
I think for me, it's about the Australian culinary experience broadening a little bit. It has come a long way in the last 20 years, but there are still things that we cook now that we were cooking 20 years ago, and I look at it and now it's new in Australia, and you think, oh come on guys, it's not really, but it just goes to show that how different countries adapt.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't know that as an Australian, I like to be known as a food ambassador. I want to create change in this food space. I want people to realise that if you're living in Bundaberg, for example, we should be eating whatever is from our region. We shouldn't be so focused on worrying about what sort of fish we can get from New South Wales. We should be going, oh wow, scallops are in season, prawns are in season, Spanish mackerel's getting caught at the moment. How do we then turn that into a dish?
You bring up a great point, and I wanted to talk to you about this today because I'm pretty big on this whole sustainable living and intentional living process right now, and I'm getting a sense of feeling particularly that there's a lot of people that are focusing more on the thinking going in behind where our food's coming from, how it's being prepared, how we're supporting our local areas. So I'm really interested to hear from you how you're doing that in Bundaberg and what's your vision around that.
Wow, this was opening up a whole new podcast. This one, my desire for, particularly for our region to get started, is that we become a group of food ambassadors as a collection. A lot of people don't realise, for the Bundaberg region, for example, 60% of Australia's fresh produce comes from this region. And I guess where I get disappointed, Mark, is when I go into a supermarket and there's produce on the shelf that is grown in this region, but it's come from another region.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different stories around food miles. And I often joke with customers in the restaurant when they're sitting down, and I say, oh, look, just to let you know, these tomatoes have come from, or this coffee was roasted by Tom, or whatever the case is. And I just like them to have an appreciation that their food is not better travelled than them.
Are you seeing that your clientele are becoming more conscious of those sorts of things?
They are there, and I think because there is, it's not just me. There's a huge movement of foodies in Australia that are creating an awareness that if you eat local, it's not just better for you because it hasn't been cold stored for excessive periods of time, and the food commodities haven't broken down, the starches aren't turning into sugars, and all the rest of the rah-rah. It's about being able to go, no. By you eating those local zucchinis that were picked this morning, you're also helping that grower send his kids to school.
Yeah.
And that grower employs 10 people, and they've got families that live in this region. I love that such a simple food trail can keep not just a local economy going, but it creates a culture of, it's like what it used to be hundreds of years ago in the UK. You would almost go to the market and I would bring eggs and you would bring pork and we'd do a deal. We can change the fresh food supply chain quite quickly and quite easily if there was no dollars involved.
Is there a forum in Bundaberg area where you're collaborating with other foodies around these kinds of visions and philosophies?
I will write that down. That's a good point. Probably the way that we all do it, Mark, is all of us are very passionate about the local produce, regardless of whether the characters always see eye to eye. They're all doing the same thing. So they're using fresh produce. They're trying to value add that product. In our region, for example, macadamia is one of the emerging markets that, not just emerging, it's a huge market. And so they've gone from just growing the nut to now they're covering them in chocolate. And what sort of chocolate do you want? Do you want dark chocolate, milk chocolate? Do you want caramelized? So people are now starting to see that we actually don't need to just be a grower or just a processor. The region and regional communities seems to be where it's happening because the infrastructure seems to be able to happen faster. Is that experience then means that they can have continuity of supply for longer.
Yep.
Because growing product or growing produce, at the moment, as you alluded earlier, we're in periods of drought. There's bushfires on our doorstep. So all those livelihoods are under stress. And I'd be fairly safe to say that if we went and did a survey through a local supermarket and asked them, where do you think these tomatoes come from? They would have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think it's easier for somebody like you to kind of share that philosophy because you're living and working closer to suppliers than, say, a restaurateur in the middle of Melbourne or Sydney?
Probably likely, very likely, because on my way to work every day when I drive to the restaurant, I'm driving past some of these farms that we get our produce from. Or when they're delivering, the grower is delivering to the back door and saying, oh, here's your micro herbs, or here's today's lettuce, or whatever the case may be. I get to see the distress in their eyes.
Yeah.
But in the same time, they get to see what's maybe the distress in my eyes. So it's creating that bond of fellow foodies that have a passion for what they're doing. I think my burning desire is that consumers or restaurant goers aren't necessarily just focused on saving $1 on the meal.
Yeah.
It's about being able to go, oh, right, that is actually a fresh piece of battered fish. It wasn't a piece of fish that came out of a box that came from somewhere overseas.
Yeah, I like that. I've had people on the show recently, and we've talked about being more conscious when we travel and thinking about, when we buy an airline ticket and the impact that has on the environment, et cetera, et cetera. Food consciousness is something else that also runs into how we travel, because we're eating every day when we're traveling. We're choosing where we go to eat. You alluded to earlier about the fast food epidemic in America, and we've all been there and done it. I guess in terms of what steps could a normal traveller take in terms of becoming more food conscious when they travel?
I think as consumers, we need to be prepared to ask the question. When you're looking at a menu, go, oh, would you mind sharing with me? Look, I'm actually a tourist in the area. Is much of this local produce? It's asking, like, I do some of my week's work out on the restaurant floor as well. So I do service staff. I love stirring people up. As that sounds terrible, but I enjoy asking them the questions and going, oh, look, how did you find those little beetroots? And they're like, oh, they're pretty good. Oh, well, Blair that grows them, he actually put them in just for us. Yeah. He planted 800 seeds. Did you realize that this is the last bunch that we're going to get for this season? And then the menu's changing. It's the customer creating an opportunity to be comfortable in talking with the service team, but then the service team having enough information that they can provide it back to the customer. And it's just the conversing as we're doing today, the conversations unlock the next generation of thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, I'm going to make sure I invite you back on the show, because we've only touched the tip of the iceberg today. I want to give you an opportunity before we wind up to give your place a bit of a plug up there in Bundaberg and tell people why they should come and try your food at your establishment.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Look, our restaurant is called HSG at the Gardens, which is Heart and Soul Gourmet. We designed a brand that is about representing the region's local produce, and our tagline is hearty meals for beautiful souls. I really want to make sure that when people come out and have a meal, they can wander around. We've got 4 acres on our restaurant, so we're primarily in our fresco space. We do have a lot of covered dining as well if the weather is bad, but we're nestled amongst the gardens. We have plans in February of next year, to put in a permaculture garden. We're introducing cooking classes that you can utilize the produce from the permaculture garden. And we're going to have to create the change the hard way, but 1 month at a time. We will keep chipping away until our restaurant going fans will be able to see the full experience for themselves of beautiful food for beautiful people in a beautiful environment.
Fantastic. I just want to put a caveat on that I'm not being paid by Dion to plug his restaurant today or any other aspect of our conversation, but I love the name of it. I think heart and soul and connecting that to food and connecting it to people's well-being, because that's what it is. It's about eating well, but also having that soulful experience. It's a beautiful thing. I'd like to come up and actually do a podcast show from your place and actually have a chat to some of your clientele. Do you get many tourists through your place?
We do. It's really quite interesting. We probably get a good 30-40% of our client are traveling through. We love the fact that we're getting discovered, and so is our region. To be fair, Bundaberg is becoming known as a foodie destination.
What are the top 5 things that tourists can do when they come and visit Bundaberg?
Wow. Okay, it would be
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, definitely. Whale watching, turtle encounters. You can do food tourism. We've got a lot of obviously very well-known brands. So our Bundy brand, Bundaberg rum brands, and Bundaberg brewed drinks, and Bundaberg sugar. All these sorts of big companies all have tour experiences. And I love the fact that you can just either hire a car or drive around and explore our regional communities, Gin, Mount Perry, all through that area, some beautiful countryside. And then you go down the coast and explore the Burnett Heads, the port, Bargara, all the beautiful coastline, and every part of it is different. We're very fortunate. I think it's about a 200 odd K radius region. It's a little bit like having a little mini UK. Every corner of our region is different.
With good weather, though.
Yeah, that's right. Probably coming when it's a little bit cooler.
Dion, before I let you go today, I'd like you to share with my audience what a couple of the biggest lessons you've learnt in life from your travelling around the world, meeting other cultures, working with other cultures in the food industry. What a couple of the takeaways that you say have been the most important lessons in life for you?
Wow. The first thing that just came to me was let go of your ego when you're traveling.
Yep.
It's a beautiful experience to be almost the innocent little lamb walking through a foreign country, but having enough courage to try new things. Be open to the fact that they love us as much as we love being there. Often is the case, particularly when you're exploring smaller regions. That tourism dollar has shown me just how much people love the idea of travel and travellers.
Yeah.
So that'd probably be my favourites, is just get out and do it. We seem to spend so much time thinking about retirement that we actually forget about the living part.
Yeah, that's so true. Get out of your comfort zone and just go and do it.
Do it now. Don't wait. Off you go.
Brilliant. Couldn't finish on a better note. Dion Taylor, thank you very much for coming on the Global Travel Channel podcast show today. I'd love to have you back in the future and we can talk all day about food and travelling, and I think there's lots that the listeners will love about this one.
Sounds exciting. I super appreciate your time as well. Thanks again.
Okay. There we are. That was Dion Taylor, currently residing in Bundaberg, Queensland, Australia. Loved having a chat with Dion and listening to his life journey on becoming an executive chef and all the wonderful stops that he took along the way. Certainly is a world that keeps evolving, the world of food and cuisine, and it's interesting. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed bringing you that particular episode. If you're looking for other episodes from the Global Travel Channel podcast show, they're easy to find. You just go over to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com, and there you'll find a whole list of all of our episodes. If you want to download them and listen to them in your own free time, then head to places like iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio. All these things are listed on our website on where you can get access to our podcast show. If you enjoy the content, why not tell your friends and family members or even work colleagues about the show? The more people we can get listening to it around the world, the better. Now, you might think of somebody out there who you think might be a great guest for me to interview. Please put them in touch with me. You can get in hold of us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram under the Global Travel Channel. Okay, that's it for this particular episode. My name is Mark Philpott. Until next time, I wish you all a happy bon voyage.